Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by saying something that might make you a little uncomfortable, because truth often does. The difference between a life of quiet desperation and one of meaning, purpose, and competence is not some grand mystery. It's responsibility. It's discipline. Tud. It's voluntarily shouldering the burden of becoming someone who can stand upright, face chaos, and create order. And there are principles, tested, ancient, psychologically sound principles, that can guide you along that path. To be proactive means to take responsibility for your own life. Tud, it's the recognition that you are not a product of your circumstances, but a product of your decisions. This habit challenges the very core of the passive mindset, the idea that external conditions, your boss, your childhood, the economy, Tud, or the people around you, determine your behavior. That's a lie. The truth is that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is your power to choose. Your ability to choose your response is what defines your growth and freedom. Stud, people who are proactive understand that they are response-able. They don't blame genetics, upbringing, or external events. They know they have the power to choose their actions and attitudes. Reactive people, on the other hand, are often driven by feelings, conditions, and circumstances. If the weather is good, they feel good. If it's bad, they feel bad. They allow the external world to dictate their internal world. Proactive individuals, by contrast, carry their own weather. It's not that they ignore reality, it's that they don't surrender to it. They act based on values, not moods or impulses. If they commit to something, they follow through, not because it's easy, not because it's convenient, but because they've chosen to be the kind of person who does what they say they'll do. There's a kind of inner dignity in that, a core of strength that doesn't come from arrogance but from clarity. To live proactively is to recognize the immense power of language, especially the language you use with yourself. Instead of saying, I have to, a proactive person says, I choose to. Instead of, I can't, they say, what are my options? It's a shift in mindset from being acted upon to being the actor. You're not a pawn, you're a player. And that shift might sound subtle, but its consequences are enormous. Once you internalize this habit, you begin to see that your life is the result of your choices. That can be terrifying, because it means you can no longer hide behind excuses. But it's also liberating. You stop waiting for someone else to change things. You become the one who initiates change. A key part of being proactive is focusing your energy where it actually matters. You don't waste your time and attention on things you can't control. That's a dead end. Proactive people focus on what's called their circle of influence, the areas where they can make a difference. When you're constantly worried about things outside that circle, global politics, other people's behavior, the past, you're just scattering your energy. You get frustrated, bitter, and paralyzed. But when you invest your effort into things you can control, your habits, your words, your choices, you gain momentum. Ironically, by focusing on what's within your control, you often expand your influence over time. People begin to trust you more. They listen, they follow. There's something deeply psychological at work here too. When you behave in a way that reinforces your sense of agency, your identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of life and start seeing yourself as someone who is capable of shaping it. That doesn't mean everything will go your way. Of course it won't. Life is harsh, chaotic, and unpredictable. But being proactive doesn't mean you control everything. It means you don't collapse when you can't. It means you adapt, you stand up straight, and you keep moving forward with intention. That's strength. That's maturity. Proactivity is not about controlling others either. It's not manipulation. It's not perfectionism. It's grounded in the idea that you can choose your response no matter what someone else does. You can choose to be calm when provoked. You can choose to act with integrity when others cut corners. You can choose to listen when it's easier to argue. And in those small moments of choice, you are forming your character. Because character isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, action by action, habit by habit. And being proactive is the foundation of that process. It's important to recognize that proactivity isn't just about grand gestures or major life changes. It's about the small, daily decisions that accumulate into a life. Waking up when you said you would, keeping your word, speaking honestly, planning your time instead of reacting to the urgent. These are not glamorous moves. They're quiet acts of discipline, but they form the bedrock of effectiveness. Because before you can lead anyone else, before you can achieve anything meaningful, you have to be able to lead yourself. And that begins with taking ownership, radical, uncomfortable, uncompromising ownership of your own behavior, your thoughts, your reactions, your habits, your time. It's all yours to manage or to waste. There's no one else to blame. Begin with the end in mind is a habit that demands clarity. It's not just about setting goals or making plans. It's about fundamentally understanding what kind of person you want to become, what values will guide you, and what legacy you want to leave behind. Most people live reactively. They move from task to task, crisis to crisis, without ever pausing to ask what it's all building toward. This habit requires you to reverse that process. Start with the destination. Picture it. Define it. Then work backwards so that your daily decisions are aligned with that vision. Without that clarity, you're just busy being efficient perhaps, but not necessarily effective. You might climb the ladder of success only to find it was leaning against the wrong wall. It's uncomfortable, but one of the most powerful ways to begin with the end in mind is to imagine your own funeral. Who's there? What do they say about you? What do you hope they'll say about the way you lived, the way you treated others, the kind of person you were? These aren't superficial questions. They cut right to the core of your values. They force you to strip away distractions and face what actually matters. When you're honest in answering them, you start to uncover a kind of internal compass. And once that compass is in place, decisions become easier. You stop living according to other people's expectations. You stop getting pulled into meaningless conflict, into distractions, into a life that looks good on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. The clarity of purpose is one of the rarest and most powerful assets a person can have. It's what gives weight to your actions. It's what allows you to say no with confidence and yes with conviction. Without it, life becomes reactive. You spend your days chasing urgency instead of pursuing significance. You get caught up in other people's agendas. You say yes to things you don't believe in. You drift. And drifting doesn't lead anywhere worth going. But when you begin with the end in mind, you set a direction. You create a standard against which everything else can be measured. That's not rigid. It's not narrow-minded. It's disciplined. It's thoughtful. And it's a refusal to waste the one life you've been given. This habit is not just about personal success. It applies to relationships, to leadership, to projects, to parenting, to every area of life. Before you write an email, have a conversation, or begin a task, ask, what outcome do I want? What's the real purpose here? That question alone can eliminate so much noise. It keeps you focused. It prevents miscommunication. It helps you act, not just react. And in a world that's constantly trying to pull your attention in 1,000 directions, that kind of intentionality is rare and valuable. It allows you to build instead of merely respond. It's the difference between a person who is moving forward and one who is simply spinning in place. It's also worth noting that beginning with the end in mind requires courage. Because once you define what truly matters to you, you can no longer hide behind business. You can no longer excuse yourself with the idea that you're just trying to get through the day. You now have to ask whether your behavior lines up with your vision. That's hard, it's confronting. It reveals gaps between who you are and who you claim to want to be. But that confrontation is necessary. It's what allows growth to happen. You don't become who you want to be by accident. You become that person through intentional, repeated alignment between your values and your actions. A mission statement can be a powerful tool in this process, not a corporate slogan or a list of cliches, but a deeply personal articulation of what you stand for. It's not something you write once and forget. It's something you revisit, refine, and apply. It becomes a lens through which you view your choices. It guides the way you treat people, the way you spend your time, the way you respond to adversity. And over time, it becomes part of you. Not just something you believe, but something you believe. In practice, this habit means asking hard questions on a regular basis. Where is this path taking me? What kind of person am I becoming by doing what I'm doing every day? Are my daily habits aligned with my long-term vision? It's not about perfection, it's about direction. Because direction is what determines destination. If you don't know where you're going, how will you know if you're making progress? How will you know what to prioritize, what to let go of, what to pursue with everything you've got? Beginning with the end in mind gives structure to your life. It brings coherence to your goals, your relationships, your time, and your energy. It doesn't eliminate uncertainty or guarantee success, but it gives you a foundation. It gives you a reason to keep going when things get hard. Because you know what it's for. You know what you're building. You know what matters and what doesn't. And that kind of clarity is not a luxury. It's a necessity if you want to live, not just exist. Think win. Win is a habit rooted in both character and mindset. It's not a technique or a tactic to manipulate people. It's a fundamental belief that life is not a zero-sum game. It's the conviction that there's enough success, recognition, opportunity, and fulfillment for everyone. This habit challenges the scarcity mentality, the deep, often unconscious belief that if someone else wins, it means you lose. That mindset creates competition where there doesn't need to be any. It creates defensiveness, fear, and mistrust. It poisons relationships, corrodes teams, and turns potential collaborators into rivals. Win thinking is grounded in an abundance mentality. It starts with the idea that true success is not achieved at the expense of others, but alongside them. It's the understanding that relationships are not transactions, they're partnerships. If one person wins while the other loses, the relationship is damaged. Over time, that damage erodes trust, which is the foundation of all cooperation. Win-win doesn't mean everyone gets exactly what they want. It means everyone leaves the interaction with dignity, with respect, and with their core needs acknowledged. It's a way of living that values both courage and consideration. Courage to express your own needs and vision. Consideration to genuinely understand and care about someone else's. This habit also exposes the flaws in traditional success models. Society often teaches people to be competitive at all costs, beat the other guy, Be number one. To climb the ladder, even if you have to step on someone else's hands while doing it. But that approach doesn't create sustainable success. It creates isolation, it breeds resentment. To win-win challenges that model and replaces it with one that's far more difficult and far more rewarding. It requires maturity. It requires empathy. It requires a deep belief that collaboration is not weakness, but strength. To think win-win, you must first be secure in your own worth. Insecure people constantly compare themselves. They need to win to feel valuable. They need to dominate to feel safe. But people who have a strong internal sense of value don't need to prove it by beating others. They know their worth is not diminished by someone else's success. That internal security allows them to look for mutual benefit, to listen without defensiveness, and to negotiate with openness instead of manipulation. They don't need to control the outcome because they're not threatened by someone else's gain. This mindset also transforms leadership. A win-win leader doesn't seek to extract the most out of people with the least possible investment. They don't rely on fear, pressure, or reward systems to drive performance. They seek alignment. They create environments where people feel heard, respected, and valued. In that kind of culture, people give more, not because they're forced to, but because they want to. Win-win leadership builds trust, and with trust, teams become more than the sum of their parts. Creativity increases, ownership increases, loyalty increases, and the results are stronger because the relationships are stronger. Conflict resolution is another place where this habit becomes essential. In every disagreement, there are competing needs, different perspectives, and real stakes. The reactive approach is to argue until someone gives in. One person wins, the other walks away bitter. But a win-win thinker approaches conflict differently. They don't ask, how can I get what I want? They ask, how can we both walk away better off? That changes the conversation. It requires real listening. It requires patience. It requires the willingness to dig beneath the surface and find third alternatives, solutions that neither side could have seen on their own. This habit is not about compromise. Compromise often means both sides give up something and walk away unsatisfied. Win is more demanding. It asks both parties to stay in the conversation long enough to create outcomes that are genuinely beneficial. That often means moving past superficial demands to understand the deeper needs. It means separating the person from the problem. It means replacing blame with curiosity. It takes more effort, more humility, and more creativity. But it produces outcomes that last. In parenting, this habit shows up in how you discipline and guide your children. Do you try to dominate them into submission? Or do you work to understand their point of view while maintaining boundaries? In marriage, it shows up in how you resolve tension and share responsibilities. In business, it shapes how you negotiate, how you collaborate, how you lead. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to either build trust or erode it. And win-win thinking consistently builds it. Living this habit also means being aware of the other two alternatives that often show up in its place: win-lose and lose-win. Win-lose is the power-based mindset that says, if I win, you must lose. It's aggressive, competitive, and transactional. Lose-win is just as damaging. It's the mindset that avoids conflict by giving in, seeking approval, or playing small. It may look kind on the surface, but it breeds resentment and erodes self-respect. Both are short-term strategies that weaken relationships. Win-win, by contrast, requires strength and generosity. It's the only mindset that preserves both self-respect and mutual respect. Seek first to understand, then to be understood is a habit that goes against most natural impulses. Most people don't truly listen. They hear words, but they don't seek meaning. They don't suspend judgment. They listen with the intent to reply, not with the intent to understand. That's why conversations often turn into arguments or worse, echo chambers where no real communication happens. This habit requires humility. It demands that you slow down your need to be right, your desire to control, and your urge to impress. It means putting your ego aside long enough to genuinely enter someone else's world and try to see things the way they see them. Understanding someone else doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean you accept every perspective as equally valid or abandon your own convictions. It means you're willing to suspend your perspective long enough to fully grasp theirs. It's emotional intelligence in action. It's the ability to recognize that behind every belief, behavior, or emotion is a story, often one that's never been told. When people feel heard, truly heard, they begin to open up, they lower their defenses. And in that space of trust, real dialogue can happen. You can't influence someone who doesn't feel understood. And you can't build a relationship on one-way communication. Most people listen autobiographically. That means they interpret what others are saying through the lens of their own experience. They respond with advice, with quick fixes, with comparisons to their own stories. But when someone is opening up, they're not asking to be fixed. They're asking to be understood. They don't need a solution right away. They need to know you care enough to listen. And not just listen passively, but to listen actively. With your full attention, your body language, to your curiosity and your empathy. Empathic listening is a skill that can be developed. It's not soft or sentimental. It's powerful. It means giving someone the gift of your full presence. It means tuning into not just the words being spoken, but the emotions behind them. It means reflecting back what you hear, asking thoughtful questions, and resisting the urge to judge or interrupt. It means stepping into another person's shoes and being willing to sit there for a while, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially if it's uncomfortable, this habit is especially critical in moments of conflict. When emotions are high and positions are entrenched, trying to argue your point first is almost always counterproductive. People don't listen when they feel dismissed. They don't open up when they feel attacked. But when you make the effort to understand where they're coming from, when you listen with the intent to understand, not to reboot, you change the dynamic entirely. You create a space where solutions can emerge, where respect can be rebuilt, and where common ground can be found in leadership. This habit separates the mediocre from the truly great. A leader who listens is a leader who earns trust. When team members feel that their opinions matter, that their concerns are taken seriously, they're far more likely to engage, to contribute, and to go the extra mile. Listening well communicates respect. It says, "You matter." And in any organization, that's a message people need to hear. Not just occasionally, but consistently. Leaders who don't listen make decisions in isolation. They create distance. They breed resentment. But leaders who listen become approachable. They become sources of clarity and calm in the chaos. This habit also applies to families, friendships, and even casual interactions. The quality of your relationships is directly tied to the quality of your communication. And the quality of your communication depends on your willingness to listen first. So many breakdowns in relationships come not from malice, but from misunderstanding. From people talking past each other. From assumptions that were never challenged. From needs that were never expressed because it never felt safe to express them. Listening creates that safety. It opens the door to honesty. Once you have truly understood someone, then, and only then, do you earn the right to be understood. And even then, it's not about dominating the conversation or pushing your point. It's about expressing your views with clarity and respect. It's about speaking not to win, but to connect. When people feel heard, they're far more open to hearing you. And when you speak from a place of calm understanding, rather than reactivity or defensiveness, your words carry more weight. They resonate. They move people. This habit is foundational to all the others because it touches the heart of human connection. It's not about communication techniques or clever phrasing. It's about who you are when you enter a conversation. Are you present? Are you curious? Are you respectful? Are you open to being changed by what you hear? Those questions matter, because communication is not just an exchange of information. It's an exchange of humanity. And in a world that's constantly shouting, the discipline to listen deeply might be one of the rarest and most transformative habits a person can develop. ShiHengYi is a habit that many overlook or reduce to simple teamwork, but it is far more than collaboration. It's the deliberate act of creating something greater than the sum of its parts. It's the recognition that differences in opinion, in background, in strengths, are not threats, but opportunities. True synergy begins when people stop trying to mold others into versions of themselves and instead begin to value what others uniquely bring to the table. It's built on trust, on humility, and on the understanding that no one person has all the answers. The world is too complex, problems are too deep, and the stakes are too high for isolated thinking to be sufficient. This habit is rooted in the idea that creative cooperation produces better results than independent effort. That doesn't mean giving up your identity or your ideas. It means integrating them with others in a way that multiplies value. Most people either fight differences or ignore them. They either try to impose their perspective or disengage when confronted with something unfamiliar. But synergy asks something more difficult and more powerful. To stay present in the tension of difference long enough to find a third alternative, one that neither side could have created alone. Synergy does not happen by accident. It requires a foundation of high trust and mutual respect. When trust is low, people defend, withdraw, manipulate, or comply. They might cooperate on the surface but compete underneath. That kind of interaction breeds mediocrity. But when trust is high, people open up. They share ideas freely. They challenge each other without fear of offense. They listen not just to respond, but to understand. That environment becomes fertile ground for innovation. It becomes a space where complexity is embraced rather than avoided. This habit is deeply tied to the previous one, seeking first to understand. Because you can't synergize with someone you don't understand. You can't create with someone if you're still trying to win the argument. You have to let go of the need to be right and embrace the curiosity to explore. That's where synergy begins. It begins when people stop defending positions and start exploring possibilities. It begins when conflict is seen not as a threat to unity, but as a catalyst for deeper unity. The practical impact of synergy can be seen in high-performing teams, in strong families, in creative partnerships, and in organizations that continue to adapt and evolve. It can be seen in communities where diversity is not just tolerated but honored. It can be seen in negotiations where both sides walk away with more than they expected. In each of these cases, the result wasn't achieved by compromise, which often means both sides lose something. It was achieved by integration, where new value was created that didn't exist before. Synergy requires a shift in mindset from independence to interdependence. Independence is a critical step in maturity, but it is not the final step. There's a form of strength that comes from standing on your own, from being self-reliant and capable. But there's a greater strength that comes from joining with others to achieve what none of you could do alone. Interdependence is not weakness, it's maturity. It's choosing to combine strengths so that the weaknesses are covered and the results are magnified. This habit also invites a radical level of openness. You have to be willing to be influenced. You have to be willing to have your ideas reshaped, expanded, or even replaced. That doesn't mean you abandon your principles. It means you hold them with confidence but not arrogance. You recognize that even your strongest ideas can benefit from being tested, refined, and challenged in the crucible of honest collaboration. That kind of openness is rare. And it's uncomfortable, but it's the soil where deep growth happens. When synergy becomes a lived habit, it affects how you approach problems. You stop asking, how can I solve this? And start asking, who can I solve this with? You stop trying to outsmart everyone and start trying to out-create with them. You don't just look for efficient answers, you look for better questions. You stop looking for shortcuts and start looking for insight. That change in posture allows new ideas to surface, new strategies to emerge, and new energy to flow into the work. Synergy also transforms relationships. It turns competition into cooperation. It turns misunderstanding into discovery. It turns division into connection. It allows people to be fully themselves without losing connection to the group. It creates space for honesty, for play, for boldness, for vulnerability. These are not just soft ideas. They're practical foundations for meaningful achievement. In education, in business, in art, in science, wherever progress happens, synergy is behind it. And it always starts the same way, with people who are willing to come together, to bring the best of themselves to it, and to create something they could never create alone.